St. Johns County Circuit Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Smith presiding.
Thank you all. Please be seated. All right, let's go on the record in case 21 CF 825, State of Florida versus Aiden Fucci. Who do I have appearing on behalf of the State of Florida? And on behalf of the defendant?
Rosemary Peoples.
Craig Addick.
And Mr. Fucci is also present. We are here today to conclude the sentencing hearing that began on Tuesday of this week. Before I get started, are there any matters that we need to address at this time from the state?
No, Your Honor.
Anything else from the defense?
No, sir.
I did receive some filings as of yesterday. I did review all of those filings. There were about 200 pages of deposition transcript. I reviewed as much of that as possible. I did look for portions of those depositions that I believe were related to this testimony that was received earlier in the week. So I have reviewed all of those filings that were filed yesterday. Before we begin, there is, I think, one matter that I need to address, and that is Ms. Peoples. As far as the determination, I think that has to be made a factual finding as to whether or not your client actually killed Tristyn Bailey. That is typically a finding that would be made by a jury. However, because there was not a jury trial, factual finding could not be made by the jury. And I just want to make sure that there's a stipulation and agreement that the court can make that factual finding based upon the testimony and evidence that was presented during the sentencing hearing. Is that all correct?
That the court is relying on the evidence that's presented in the sentencing hearing.
And
for
yes,
that factual finding.
for the court to make the factual finding. You're waiving your right to have a jury make that factual finding.
Yes, by entering the plea, Your Honor. Yes.
All right. Based on the evidence that was presented during the sentencing hearing, as well as the defendant's plea to the charge of premeditated first-degree murder, the court does find that Aiden Fucci killed Tristyn Bailey, which now makes the range of possible sentences for Mr. Fucci a minimum of 40 years in prison up to life in prison. Before I begin to address the statutory factors that the court must consider under 921.1401, let me address the Bailey family, as well as the friends who are here today and who have also been here throughout these proceedings. The loss in which you have clearly suffered is unimaginable. The court was certainly moved by the words and the victim impact statements that were presented earlier this week. I have been through these types of proceedings numerous times. Sometimes family members hope or expect that whatever the sentence is, that somehow or another that's going to heal or provide closure. And I just want to warn you that it's not. It's not how it works. No matter what sentence this court imposes today, it cannot heal you. I cannot bring her back. I cannot provide a closure to this. It may close a chapter of this, but it will not close this for you. You still have a lot of healing to do. And I certainly am not going to take the place of any of your counselors or therapists. But my advice to you is simply this. Understand that the healing process takes time, and you have to move through the stages, and you have to allow each other to move through the stages at your own pace. Comfort each other, but understand that some of you may reach different phases of this healing process sooner than others. Your daughter and your sister are obviously, her body is no longer present on this earth. However, her spirit lives on through each and every one of you. From what this court can tell, she was quite a energetic, happy child. Some of you testified to the fact that when you learned of her death, that part of you died as well. And what I would suggest is that you fill that void with her spirit and her life that certainly lives on through each and every one of you. Allow Bailey Sunday Fun Days to return to your home. Allow laughter to return to your home, because in depriving yourselves of that, frankly, you're continuing, it would continue to victimize Tristyn, because that's not what she would want. She would want that happiness and the laughter to return, and the joking between her siblings. That's what she would truly want. You have to try to let go of some of the anger that you still feel. I think that's a big part of this process for you. Mr. Bailey, I want to address something that you mentioned, and that was the process of these court proceedings. I know it's been a long 22 months for your family as well as for this community. Justice at times can move a little bit slowly for those who are thrust into it. For those of us who practice it and live it and work it every day, I assure you that there are constitutional safeguards that are in place in this country, and they're there for a very important reason. And sometimes that takes time to work through that process. And that can be frustrating, it can be agonizing at times. But we strive to make sure that we get things right the first time, and that we do things the proper way. And I appreciated your comments, and I appreciated the patience that your family and the community has shown to the court system. These attorneys have worked diligently. They have had, on both sides, they have, this is not their only case, sadly. This is the only courtroom in all of St. Johns County with over 300,000 people who now live in this community. We have one felony courtroom. So every felony, every murder, it takes place in this courtroom. And these attorneys are assigned to cases throughout this circuit. I trust and I believe that they have done a diligent job in this case. And again, I recognize that it can certainly take some time, and I appreciate the patience that you've shown, and I hope that you understand the necessity in making sure that things are done the proper way. Pursuant to section 921.1401, the court, in determining whether a life imprisonment or a term of years equal to life imprisonment is an appropriate sentence, the court must consider the following factors. A, the nature and circumstances of the offense committed by the defendant. B, the effect of the crime on the victim's family and on the community. C, the defendant's age, maturity, intellectual capacity, and mental and emotional health at the time of the offense. D, the defendant's background, including his or her family, home, community, environment. E, the effect, if any, of immaturity, impetuosity, or failure to appreciate the risks and consequences on the defendant's participation in the offense. F, the extent of the defendant's participation in the offense. G, the effect, if any, of familial pressure or peer pressure on the defendant's actions. H, the nature and extent of the defendant's prior criminal history. I, the effect, if any, of characteristics attributable to the defendant's youth on the defendant's judgment. And J, the possibility of rehabilitating the defendant. I have considered all of the evidence that has been presented for the during this week. The testimony that was presented, the victim impact statements, the evidence that was submitted, the filings, and I have analyzed each and every one of those factors as well as any other factors that may be relevant to these proceedings in order to determine an appropriate sentence for this case. The statute requires the court to make specific findings on the record, which is what I will now do. I'm going to begin with factor C, the defendant's age, maturity, intellectual capacity, and mental and emotional health at the time of the offense. This defendant was 14 years old when this act was committed. It is well established, and this court accepts fully that an individual's brain is not fully developed until they reach sometime in their 20s. There is no question to the science behind that. This court recognizes it, accepts it. The court finds that the defendant himself was of average maturity for his age. Based on the testimony that was presented, there were comments about that he was of average maturity, that some of his friends looked upon him as even more mature than the average 14-year-old. He did have a learning disability. His grades suffered as a result. He struggled in school. Resources were put into place to assist him, which he did respond to. The Dean of Students testified about his work with Mr. Fucci, and that there were some things that were done to assist him. He did have some discipline issues at school, but he had a good rapport with that dean, seemed to have a good plan in place. The court has heard the testimony and received some testimony about his emotional health, which kind of segues into the next factor, which is the defendant's background, including his or her family home and community environment. The defendant had a fairly normal home environment. He had two parents who were very involved in his life. The testimony from the grandmother was that his father never missed time sharing, his mother never missed time sharing. I want to comment on the grandmother who testified, who came into this courtroom and testified. That took a lot of courage. That was not easy for her, but it did show this court that he had a good, stable home environment. Well, there had been some discussion about, from his girlfriend, that she felt as though maybe there were some things that were going on at home. Based on all of the testimony and evidence, this court does not find that he suffered from any type of physical or emotional abuse. It does not appear that there was any significant alcohol or drug abuse inside the home. Additionally, the court reviewed the letters that were submitted by his mother and his father, in particular the letter from the father. The court was also moved by, indicated that there was a strong father-son relationship. I'm going to skip factor E for just a moment and move to factor F, the extent of the defendant's participation in this offense. This court does find that the defendant was the sole participant in this offense. He was 100% responsible for this murder. This court does not believe that there was any encouragement or enticement from anyone else to get him to commit this crime. As to factor G, the effect, if any, of familial pressure or peer pressure on the defendant's actions, the court received no evidence that would suggest that there was any familial or peer pressure on the defendant's actions in this case. The nature, factor H, the nature and extent of the defendant's prior criminal history. This defendant has no prior criminal history. The court did receive, and there had been some discussion about whether or not the court could consider any prior or post-bad acts. I want to make it very clear that the only consideration that this court is giving to any of the information that it received related to any prior acts in school or fights or any of the statements or acts that occurred after his arrest while he was incarcerated were received and considered solely for the purpose of analyzing the factors in this statute. It in no way, shape, or form does this court has this court considered those matters in order to enhance his sentence. It is simply to apply them and apply those issues to these particular factors. The effect, if any, of characteristics attributable to the defendant's youth on the defendant's judgment. I've already considered his youth. I don't find that there were any other characteristics of his youth that really played a part in this crime. J, the possibility of rehabilitating the defendant. I would say that the defendant has shown some ability to modify his behavior that was shown in school through the dean of students. However, as Dr. Pritchard noted, this crime is extraordinary. His behavior was so unusual compared to individuals his age that there is a poor prognosis for rehabilitation. Let me move to factor B, the effect of the crime on the victim's family and on the community. The effect of this crime that is had on the victim's family and on the community is significant. There is no greater loss than the loss of one's own child. The nature and circumstances of her death have caused an even greater trauma on her loved ones. Her siblings, parents, and extended family members all provided compelling victim impact statements relating their personal struggles with coping with her death. It has caused them deep and emotional and mental health problems. They are no longer able to function as the family they once were. It has also had a tremendous impact and effect on this community. This court has reviewed all of the letters that were submitted by her friends, teachers, coaches, and others. Approximately 150 letters were received. I have read all of them, and all of them strike a similar chord. This was a devastating crime. It was devastating to the children of this community. It materially changed an entire community. Some of the letters indicated and discussed children who were teenage children who could not sleep in their beds alone and had to sleep in between their parents for fear of what happened in this case. One of the letters I read mentioned the exhaustion of any mental health resources. The supply was in such need that the need was so great that the supply of mental health resources, there was an insufficient number of counselors. Individuals had to wait weeks or even months before they could get in to see a grief counselor. I would submit that this case is probably the most difficult and shocking case that this county in St. Johns County has dealt with. In the 20 years that I have been, or 16 years that I have been practicing law, and the 30 years that I have lived and worked in this all of Northeast Florida, this case is one of only a very small few that had this level and this type of impact on the community. This court gives this factor great weight. As to the last two remaining factors, the effect, if any, of immaturity, impetuosity, or failure to appreciate the risks and consequences of the defendant's participation in the offense, and the effect of the crime, and the nature and circumstances of the offense committed by the defendant. These factors are somewhat combined. "114 stab wounds, 49 defensive wounds, 35 wounds to the head and neck, 29 to the back and shoulder, and 6 fatal wounds." This court has reviewed and seen more than its fair share of autopsy photos. The autopsy photos in this particular case were particularly difficult. The 49 defensive wounds indicate that Tristyn Bailey was conscious, that she was aware, and that she was doing everything she could to fend off this attack. She suffered a painful, horrifying death from someone that she trusted. Her screams were most likely stifled by her own suffocating lungs. He lured her into a secluded place in the woods near his home, a person that she trusted, and he led her there under false pretenses. There was a heightened level of premeditation in this case. Based on the prior statements that he made to his girlfriend and his friend, he indicated that he was going to kill someone. At which point he determined that it was going to be Tristyn Bailey, I don't know. But there was going to be a victim. He indicated that how he was going to do it, that he would take them into a wooded place, that he would stab them, he would kill them and then run away so that he could keep on killing. He told his best friend that he wanted to kill someone to see what it felt like, and he wanted to watch them bleed out. This particular crime was committed with the weapon of choice as a knife, which he nicknamed Poker. That required a up-close, personal, type of murder that is rare. It's unique. The court accepts that in 2019, of all juvenile arrests, only 7% were violent and only 1% of those were homicides. This crime is clearly an outlier, and it was shocking, and it is shocking to the conscious. This court finds that the defendant's participation in this offense was not the result of immaturity or impetuosity. He understood the risks and consequences of his actions. He previously told his girlfriend that he was going to do this. That clearly shows that he had been planning it. He attempted to cover it up by disposing of the murder weapon and throwing it into a lake. He then attempted to conceal evidence by hiding his shoes and shirt and jeans, taking a shower, stealthily entering his home, and then the actions immediately after, with the Snapchat videos in the back of the police car and the story that he made up about pushing her and her hitting her head, which was clearly refuted by the video evidence in this case. All of that shows, and this court finds, that this was not an immature or an impetuous type of crime. It makes it unique. It makes it extraordinary. What is also very troubling is that this crime had no motive. This was not done out of greed. It was not done in retaliation, retribution, or revenge. It was not a crime of passion. It was not a crime that was committed because he felt rejected by her. It was not done in a fit of uncontrollable anger. There was no reason. There was no purpose. It was done for no other reason than to satisfy this defendant's internal desire to feel what it was like to kill someone. It was committed in a cold, calculated, and premeditated manner without any pretense for moral or legal justification, and it was heinous, atrocious, and cruel. This factor and this factor alone makes this case and this defendant more than just unique. It is for this reason and all of the reasons previously stated that leads this court to the conclusion that there is only one appropriate sentence in this case. Mr. Fucci, if you and your attorneys would please rise. Counsel, is there any legal reason why this court cannot impose sentence at this time?
No, sir.
Mr. Fucci, having entered a plea of guilty to the crime of first-degree murder, I adjudicate you guilty of the premeditated first-degree murder of Tristyn Bailey. I sentence you to life in prison. Because of your age, you are eligible for review of the sentence in 25 years. I order the Department of Corrections to notify you when you are eligible to apply for your review hearing. Madam Clerk, if you will please impose the minimum fines and court costs. Mr. Fucci, you have 30 days to appeal the legality of this court's sentence. If you wish to appeal but cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. You will be taken back to the Duval County Jail and then transported into the Florida State Prison System. We are adjourned.
district for this circuit is going to be speaking at some point later on this morning about this particular situation. Not unusual for R.J. Larissa to do this. He spoke when this crime first happened,
Right.
and now is going to wrap up commentary about the case now. A shocking crime, as that's how the judge put it, a unique crime. That's also how he put it. Anything else you'd like to add?
I think we've certainly seen the impact of what happens when the village around a child fails. Whether or not there was a finding of abuse, there was certainly a subjective feeling from Aiden Fucci that he was not loved and he wasn't cared for. And it's just a lesson for the community to get involved with other children and for the school system to take the extra step to make sure the parents are aware of concerns to avoid things like this from happening.
So, Shannon, we are going to now send our television viewers back to their regular broadcast, but we're going to continue talking about this announcement of life in prison for Aiden Fucci on our website as well as on our app. For those who have been watching on television, thank you so much, and we appreciate you watching. We will send you now back to your regular program. All right, for those of you who remain with us,
this has been a First Coast News special report.
of murder, which is rare and unique, especially for a juvenile.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what makes this case really so different.
Absolutely. And going back to the fact that like there is no motive here other than I just wanted to know what it was like to brutally kill someone. And it was so unique. And there's one thing to kill someone with a knife and up close and personal in the heat of a moment, but to make this plan and to do it is unique, not in a good way, for any homicide, and especially for a juvenile. I've worked with Judge Smith when he was a prosecutor.
Oh, is that right?
Well,
okay.
we were on other sides, but
Okay.
I'm familiar with some of the cases that came through Duval County, when he was prosecuting in the Fourth Circuit. And like he said, he's never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
And I really can't think of anything other than maybe Josh Phillips being an example of how, a murder can really affect a community. But this case had a unique effect. Again, I think because Tristyn Bailey trusted Aiden Fucci when this happened.
Yeah, you're right, and the judge did mention for St. Johns County, he does, and this may rank up with some of the most unique cases this county has seen. Going back to the school situation with the students and the impact on the community, which is one of the factors the judge has to consider in delivering the sentence, he said the exhaustion of mental health resources was not what he had seen before. And I believe that he gathered that from some of the letters and some of the notes that he received, 150 of them or 130 of them. And that alone shows the impact on this community, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it also shows the impact and again, going to juveniles specifically, these children are seeking help. And so to say that this community did not have the resources to provide every child in this community mental health care, that in and of itself raises some concerns, right? Oh. And I think that's, again, something that can be learned from this incident is don't wait until you're going through the trauma, going through the grief to seek mental health care, whether it's for grief trauma or for concerns you have about your child. And too often we see parents and people who are embarrassed to seek mental health care until it gets so bad. If there's no demand, you're not gonna have the resources, and if it's too late, and you have this overwhelming demand, I would expect that there's not gonna be, the resources for people, and hopefully that has changed in this community.
That is certainly the case. Hopefully we won't have to deal with another situation like this, of course, right? So the judge continued on. He is the sole participant. Fucci was the sole participant, 100% responsible for this murder. No peer pressure. Again, things that he has to consider in delivering this sentence. So now Fucci will go back to the Duval County Jail and then entered into the state correctional program.
Correct.
My understanding is there are only 2 facilities facilities that can take juveniles in the state.
That's correct.
Like this.
I don't know if it's 2. I would have to check that number, but I know
Okay.
the one that you can expect him to go to is the Baker County Correctional Institution, where they have facilities specifically for children who are committed to the Department of Corrections.
Okay.
So what that means is that the judge did make one order that the Department of Corrections should notify Aiden Fucci when he's eligible for his review hearing. But other than that, the judge really can't order the Department of Corrections to do anything because of our separation of powers. That's an
okay.
executive power. So they will now take custody, care, control of Aiden Fucci. They're responsible for all of his needs, all of his basic needs, and they will make decisions about what he has access to, what resources he has, and where he will live. And he will be identified by a prison number.
So, you know, his grandmother painted this picture of, it was a happy home. And the judge really latched onto that, along with the letters from, especially from Aiden Fucci's father, saying there was a good father-son relationship there. Idea of, well, what happened? Where did things turn?
Right. You know, my professional opinion on the state's or the defense's mitigation and the letters from the dad versus the family life versus what Aiden Fucci believed about his family life and what the family said, I think there are some conflicts.
Okay.
His attorneys kind of made that point, but I don't know that they emphasized it enough. Some things that struck me were the night of this incident, his brothers left him. They wouldn't pick him up. They said they didn't have gas money. So if you have a 14-year-old whose brain is not fully developed, who believes that his family doesn't care about them and his brothers can't be bothered to pick him up for their version of Bailey, Sunday, what more is a child to think than they literally can't even spend a couple dollars on gas to pick me up? So I think that there were absolutely conflicts, and while I think it was courageous of the grandmother to come and speak on behalf of the family, I still don't really understand the purpose of her testimony because, again, I don't know that the defense really emphasized in their questioning and in their argument that although they are saying it was a happy home, there were conflicts in what she said.
Another point that we've talked about earlier this week is the possibility for rehabilitation. And that is less prioritized for the individual if he has a life sentence.
Right.
So now Aiden Fucci has a life sentence. He will then have less priority for programs in jail, educational programs, skill, technique training, and what was it? Somebody said this is going to be asocial people teaching
Raising him,
meaning inmates,
Right.
and not necessarily others who could really have more of an impact.
Exactly, and that's another point that the defense made, but again, I don't know how strongly, to say that, if you have the opportunity to be released, you're going to make more of an effort, but Aiden Fucci, because he's a juvenile, does have the ability to be released, regardless of whether or not he has a life sentence. But knowing he's facing down life sentence, he may not take the same time of care to actually rehabilitate himself, because the purpose of the Florida Department of Corrections is not to rehabilitate, it is to punish. So it is on him to seek rehabilitation and to prove his rehabilitation in 25 years.
And just a couple notes from what we saw inside of the courthouse, or the courtroom, I should say, is that the Bailey family were all wearing very similar shirts that said,
I think it said
that's my
Tristyn Strong.
squad.
Oh,
And
okay,
Tristyn Bailey Strong.
Right.
And that's my squad. She would say that.
Right.
And when the judge started speaking directly to the family, the mother and other people associated with the family just really started crying.
Right.
Yeah, that was sad to see.
It was really sad, and again, I think unique cases call for some unique circumstances. I have certainly seen other judges address victims, address families, but I think certainly in this case, the Bailey family is very much a presence in the community and certainly in the courtroom, a very big presence. So it's hard, it's kind of like the judge couldn't go without really making some comments and giving some feedback. But again, I think everything the court said was appropriate, was sincere, and was really based on his experience, the court's experience with so many other victims. And while this was a particularly brutal and unsettling murder, you know, a loss is a loss.
Absolutely.
Of a child.
Yes. And not just for the Bailey family, although they are certainly feeling it, but for Aiden's family.
Right.
They have lost him now.
Yes.
Too.
Yes. And I think, again, it's interesting his parents weren't there. This would be the last time they could see their son, but that's not behind a plate glass window. So I think it's really tragic, certainly. Again, we don't know what happened, but we know at 11 things changed for Aiden Fucci, and with 4 years, here we are. And there's so many. This is certainly a case that I would love for Aiden Fucci to one day talk more about.
I was thinking that too.
Right, without his input, there are no solutions.
Shannon, you have been great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us this insight. Our legal analyst, Shannon Schott here. We're going to wrap things up on our end of the streaming. Thank you for joining us.
sure it doesn't. Good news is you got them in the shade, and there's a little breeze. Didn't have a better, nicer day, too. in there know how difficult that was for the family. I mean, try to imagine what it would be like for you, for it to be your family, and you're there listening to what that judge was saying about what happened to your family member, your daughter, your brother, your sister, your niece, your granddaughter. You know, the system is not kind to victims and their families. The process demands, as the judge said, constitutional rights and constitutional mandates, but sometimes the victims and their families get lost in that shuffle. But not here, and not today, and not in St. Johns County. I can tell you that having met the Bailey family, and I haven't spent as much time with them as Jennifer Dutton has, the lead prosecutor in this case, but I can tell you that I am a much better man and a much better prosecutor having met them. I just only hope that should I be faced with the tremendous trauma and grief of going through a loss like they did, that I could handle it with the dignity and grace that they have to this point. And again, let me remind you, try to put yourself in their shoes and how difficult this whole process has been. 22 months of court proceedings, 22 months of media coverage, and I'm not pointing fingers or blaming the media. We understand that this is a story that needs to be covered, but please try to be empathetic to these folks as we go through this process today. Now I'm going to call Mr. Forrest Bailey up to speak. The Bailey family will not be taking questions. Mr. Bailey is going to read a statement to you. At this time, I would ask Forrest if he would please come up.
Good morning. My name is Forrest Bailey, and I am Tristyn Tynes' father, and I will be speaking on behalf of my family. To start with, I would first like to thank God for the strength He has given us since Tristyn was taken from us, the grace He has instilled within us to support each other as we grieve, and especially for the incredible love that we have seen from so many in the world. I would like to thank the Honorable Judge Smith for his consideration in deciding upon the life sentence verdict. While it can seem so easy to many people for this to be the verdict, it must be an extremely difficult determination for the judge to arrive at, given all the aspects he needs to consider. We are very appreciative of this outcome and feel that it is the right verdict, considering how heinous the crime is and Aiden's behaviors around it. In one of our initial meetings with R.J. Larissa from the State Attorney Office, we gave our word that we would wait until the criminal proceedings were complete so that we did not distract from justice being served. It is important that the case is tried in the court of law. In agreement with them, we do have a few brief words to say today. However, we will not be very expansive as there is still an open case with Crystal Smith. During her celebration of life, we shared that to continue Tristyn's fight, we are going to fight for justice. Truth be told, this fight was done by so many, and the outcome today is a result of their efforts. Before we get into some of those thanks, as a parent, foremost, I would like to caution both parents and children on the dangers of social media and technology. As has come out through the proceedings, Aiden Fucci did not even have Tristyn's contact information until the evening before he killed her. While we have gone to a point where children are carrying technology for convenience and safety to contact their parents and their friends when needed, it comes at a great risk. It likely would not have made a difference in Tristyn's case, as it was referred from a trusted friend, and she also knew Aiden from school. However, we would be sick to have it happen to any other family by not raising our concerns and our cautions. Please, to all the kids, if your parents require you to turn in your cell phones, realize your phone is a privilege, not a right, and that they are demonstrating love and protection for you. Parents, I encourage you to do so. As part of this investigation, the amount of kids sneaking out in our community and the frequency of how often they are doing so had us completely dumbfounded. On a different note, during Wednesday's proceedings and the filings at the end of the day, there were several apologies given from Aiden and some members of Aiden's family. Foremost to his grandmother, your apology on the stand really touched us. It was the first time anyone in your family had acknowledged it, and we feel for you as we could tell how much you are hurting. With respect to the apology letter from Aiden, from his behavior at court, at no point has his actions fell in line with the letter, and I believe it is due to the coaching from the defense. With respect to the legal process that takes time, and to the comment from the defense about us not accepting the apology, I find that hard to stomach. The defense was insensitive to my family when they called out in writing our participations in these proceedings, which are our right to do so. They mentioned it in filings. They even went further by sending out a survey to my wife asking her opinion on Aiden murdering Tristyn. At no point did they have the common decency to give an apology, so I think they should reconsider their high ground before they advise anyone else on apologies. With regard to Crystal Smith and her apology, as I mentioned before, there's an open case with her, so it's difficult to comment. The fact that we are continuing to have to go through the legal process makes the apology questionable. You've seen the videos from the home. You've seen the videos from the interrogation room. I would say if she's sorry, she can start by accepting responsibility. To Aiden's family, I would remind them that he is still here. They can still see him. They can encourage him to change his behavior of bragging about his brutality and threatening the corrections officers and their families that keep him from harm and setting out on a better road. To those around his extended family, please extend them kindness. They should be given grace for the pain they are going through. They should not be given additional hardship. Tristyn had a good friend amongst his extended family, and treating them poorly based on Aiden's crime does not honor her memory or her spirit. At this point, I would like to transition and thank a number of parties which are typically either overlooked or not thanked. As a start, I would like to first thank our local Jacksonville-based media. Over time, we realized that the facts around this case made it one that was of great public interest. It happened in the well-recognized family county of St. John's. It was a vicious murder by a 14-year-old of a 13-year-old, and it happened on Mother's Day. An absolute lightning rod. Along the way, you have requested our respect for privacy, as well as our intent to wait until these proceedings are complete before sharing our thoughts. I think what is very important, as we saw respectful communication in the coverage and how things are dealt. For example, as a victim's family, I hate seeing the picture of my beautiful daughter next to the person responsible for her murder. I think that's true for most victims' families. When we express this and our outrage and the hurt it caused, we saw a change over time, both in the broadcast as well as the articles, and we appreciate those efforts. While likely also driven through the incredible compassion and love demonstrated from the St. John's community, we also saw focus of the victim and highlights of Tristyn's life and what she did. This is important. It shouldn't just be about the details of their death. I would suggest there needs to be more focus put on the victims of other crimes and not just these lightning cases. For example, there was a recent murder in Putnam County of Ayanna Belton, which was similar in brutality, and yet not enough highlighted on that family and her loss. Also like to say a very quick word with respect to some of the most social media stories, the podcasts, the channels. More and more people are turning to these channels to get information. It is my hope, honestly, for people to do better and to be more sensitive. For anyone that tunes to these channels, please realize that there are subscribers and web clicks, and you may approximate that to ratings for established news media. Yet this is not reflective of the integrity of the information that you are consuming. Over the course of the past almost 2 years, we had several people send us links from programs. Many of them were downright nauseating. They were inaccurate. They were over-dramatization. Truly, it's hurtful to the victims' families. They're profiting from this. However, there were some that were very truthful, some that had done some research, and there were some that were out there that were trying to do a good job. How you tell the difference between them is not clear. So again, I would caution people as to where they get their information. My intent here, though, is not to criticize, but encourage people to do better. I would even give a recent example, as there was a Twitter account that posted information that was very unnecessary and hurtful. When a good family friend reached out to them to explain this, they connected that this was a real person with people still grieving for her loss. They then took it down. They stated an apology from what they learned from it. I have no idea who sits behind the keyboard of @docket, and it's unlikely that I never meet the individual. Yet the way he handled the mistake speaks well to his integrity, and it gives me hope that this will improve in time. Sticking with the theme of appreciating people that do not get enough, I have to thank the 7th Circuit State Attorney's Office. Many of us understand the importance of having great leadership at the top, and I absolutely have to say this is the case with respect to R.J. Larissa. From the initial conversation we had with him around the grand jury, until meeting with him recently, preparing to go to trial, we know he has been focused on getting justice and doing so in a compassionate way. I am deeply grateful for the work he's continuing to do. RJ, thank you. To the state attorney prosecution team of Jennifer Dudden and Mark Johnson, while we understand that you work for the state of Florida, we could not have wished for 2 better people to prosecute this case. Along the way, the care and compassion and understanding that you showed to my family was exemplary. You made it very easy to have faith that you would get justice. In addition to you, we also want to thank your families. We know that there was a tremendous amount of sacrifices made by them to make sure that you could prosecute this to the fullest extent, and they had a lot of disruptions, and we appreciate it. There were many times that you had to prepare us for the very worst, leading up to February 6th when we expected to go to trial. We know you wanted to make sure we were prepared for the facts and details. The compassionate way in which you made sure we were prepared for things as horrific as the crime scene photos and the medical examiner's report speaks volumes to the incredible people you are at your core. I cannot fathom how you do the job that you do, and I'm very grateful that you represent the people in the 7th Judicial Circuit and on our case. Jenny, Mark, from the bottom of our heart, thank you. We are also well aware that the entire staff of the 7th Circuit State Attorney's Office helped either directly or indirectly on this case. Again, we're incredibly thankful You were the first person that I spoke with. You've been a contact throughout, and you've really touched our heart. When we learned that you delayed your retirement from November when the trial date moved because you wanted to see this case through, it was a tremendous reflection of the entire office. Thank you so much for everything you did for us, and thank you for so much for everything that you've done for our justice system in our over 30 years. Thank you. It's impossible to talk about the 7 state attorney's office without also mentioning the St. John's Sheriff's Office. Again, much of this starts with the leadership at the very top. Years ago, when he was at the start of his law enforcement career, Sheriff Hardwick worked on the Haley Cummings case. Sheriff Hardwick applied everything he learned from that case to Tristyn's. Our county is extremely fortunate to have Sheriff Hardwick at the helm as we continue to grow in St. John's. He and Kendall are tireless in their efforts to engage with the community, and the work he does in the background to support everyone in the SJSO is unseen to the public, yet so appreciated and felt by the people in his department. Servant leadership and leading from the front at its best. Support from the St. John's Sheriff's Office truly began prior to us ever needing to call. He and his team have developed an incredible network within the community. The youth resource officers who mean so much to the students within the schools they are in. For us, this was Deputy Beasley. When the 911 call was made and the social media information started coming in, as Stacy mentioned, Deputy Beasley was integral in starting to help the investigative crew make some connections. With respect to that investigative crew, the thoroughness and attentiveness of their work clearly came through on Tuesday. This was both with the original patrol and especially with respect to Sergeant Kurt Hannon. I have thanked Sergeant Hannon so many times and will never be able to thank him enough. Everything he did to coordinate the work of a massive team and also to get the information that came from the community. While it was incredibly difficult news to hear, the fact that he showed up at our door at 3:40 in the morning to let us know they had her killer meant the world. We know there are so many contributed to the case throughout this time and even recently. Again, on behalf of my family, we appreciate each and every one of you and also give our heartfelt thanks to your respective families who support the incredible work you do. There is also a very special group of people I'd like to recognize in the bailiffs that work here at the courthouse and are in the courtyard with us today. These people are simply incredible at what they do. I was able to sit in a room with a known killer of one of my family members and have no concern for the safety of the rest of my family. In every interaction, they were also so understanding and supportive. Truly just an amazing group of people. There are a few people I would like to call out individually to thank. First off, I have to thank Bob Ellis. He's been a wonderful and true friend. He helped me in so many ways, and I'm extremely grateful for it. I also need to thank Matthew H. Henson. My family has known and worked with Matt for several years, and I was so thankful when he offered to help us coordinate all the media requests. He did so much more than that. There are so many times he has also been a venting and guidance outlet to our family, and particularly me. Matt, thank you. To the counseling community that has helped my family throughout this, I'm very appreciative, in particular Megan Logan and Kaylee Brennan. This grieving process is hard, and without the additional focus that we have had, we would not stand as strong if it weren't for your respective help. Ashley Mitchell. We would be here for hours, to talk about everything that you have done for the different members of our family as our victims advocate. Your network was invaluable in helping us to find counseling resources we needed. You were always extremely adept at following up on every initial rumor or concern that made its way to us in the early days, and very knowledgeable about explaining and setting our expectations for what is to come in the legal process. I've been truly amazed at how you have learned Bailey time. You seem to always communicate the right time for us to be here so that we could get through security and not delay the court proceedings. Ashley, in the wide expanse of people that our family knows, no one has ever done this as well as you have. From the bottom of our heart, thank you. In the days ahead, we're going to shift our focus and talk more about Tristyn, the plans that we have to celebrate her legacy. And we have a tremendous amount to share about this St. John's community, the people in it, the businesses that have supported us, the cheer community, and everything that they've done. As I look over, I also see all of our friends and family, and it's just a small sample of who could be here today. You've helped carry us throughout, and we appreciate and love each and every one of you. Today is about focusing on the people who helped deliver justice for our community, and I want to keep the focus on that. Before I close, though, I would like to say a few words into the universe. God, I know you're always listening when we talk to you, and would ask your assistance to get Tristyn's attention for a moment, as she probably started doing something more fun as I was going along. Tristyn, I wanted to let you know we are so extremely proud of the person that you were in your time here. We have seen that when you went out into the world, you gave it your very best. You should be proud of the friend that you were, the teammate you were, and what you left behind, and the people that knew you, that we trust will go forward and continue to make the world a better place. With respect to what you mean to our family, it's in our hearts. There are no words. We love you. We will continue to hold you in our hearts, and we will always be the Bailey 7. At this time, it's my pleasure to hand it over to Sheriff Rob Hardwick.
I wish I actually would have spoke before you, Forrest. I'm not sure how you followed that besides putting an exclamation point behind that statement that he gave on behalf of the Bailey family. I will tell you this. Mother's Day of 2021, the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office got the privilege to meet the Bailey 7. We wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that horrific incident. With that being said, what happened was a team came together from the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, the 7th Judicial Circuit State Attorney's Office, and today we finished what we started together with the Bailey 7. We could not ask for a better family to be a victim in this process. Patient, respectful, understanding, and truly finished it to the end together with our team. We, together with the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, you're no longer the Bailey 7, you're the Bailey 927 is what you are. With that being said, I do want to recognize two people that Forrest actually mentioned that are right to my left, to your right. And that's Sergeant Kurt Hannon, who was the lead investigator from the start, and then our lead victim advocate, Ashley Mitchell, who was also introduced here a minute ago. The entire team at the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, it takes a true team to work these type of cases, and we did it together. However, these two individuals started it and finished it with this family by their side 24 hours a day. And again, they are part of that Bailey family now. I do want to recognize the prosecutors in this case, Jenny Dutton and Mark Johnson. RJ, as you know, I had the privilege of working with both those when I worked for the state attorney's office. You want to talk about the epitome of prosecutors with preparing a case from start to finish. Those are the two that actually know how to do it right. By the way, they were prepared for trial, and they were prepared to win in trial, all the way to the day today when he was actually sentenced. With that being said, on behalf of the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, the entire team that put this case together, with R.J. Larizza, and his entire state attorney's office team, thank you to the Bailey family for understanding of what this job entails. Again, we will forever be a part of the Bailey 927. Thank you.
I wish you two weren't behind me.
As I said when we started this is reality. This is the true nitty-gritty of what happens when we have violence in our communities and the impact that it takes, not just on the family, but the community. And again, I urge and challenge all of you in the media to respect that and to recognize that as you cover stories, and unfortunately there'll probably be more stories that you will cover that will have the impact of what we've had today. It's a sad reality of the world in which we live. Having said that, I'd just like to also recognize Jenny Dunton and Mark Johnson. You don't understand the toll it takes on prosecutors as well to immerse themselves in cases like this over and over again. With families to take care of, they come in and work nights and weekends and holidays to make it happen. And I truly appreciate and respect that. Now, if you have any questions, again, the Bailey family is not taking questions. But if you have questions, we will entertain them at this time.
State Attorney, listening to you, listening to Sheriff Hardwick, it's clearly personal. How do you try a case, make sure that you do everything, check off all the boxes legally, when you're looking at a 13-year-old girl who lost her life, her family dealing with so much pain? How do you separate that and still show compassion?
Well, I'm not sure that you separate it. You become a part of it. The truly great prosecutors, the great investigators, you have to become a part of it. That's why it takes such a toll. And that's why I'm saying, think about what it does to the families and think about what it does to the folks that are involved. We have to dive in and deal with it and show the families that we care and that we're going to do something about it. That's how we deal with it.
What changes do you think need to occur when it comes to our youth? We had a family member get on the stand and say that trust and faith in the system to keep violence away from innocent children in schools is gone to that family member. So intervention, what does that look like now in the Seventh Circuit?
Well, I can tell you one of the things, and it's a sad reality, is we have a Young Guns initiative involving juveniles and 20-somethings that are committing most of your violent crime in our communities. And it's not just St. Johns County. It's not just the 7th Circuit. I'm not sure what the cause is, but I can tell you from the experience I'm seeing each and every day. Look at Pine Hills in Orlando. Look at what happened in other parts of our community. Young people don't seem to have respect for life. Aiden Fucci certainly didn't. He said he was going to kill someone, and he did. And now we deal with the aftermath. So I challenge our local governments, our state governments, and our federal governments to help find a solution. We, the criminal justice system, Sheriff Hardwick and I, we see the end result of the failure. And then we're expected to do something about it. The criminal justice system, we're here to protect families. We're here to protect the Baileys and other folks and to get justice when it's caught, when we can. So the challenge is to get the community and the government involved to find out how they can try to intervene and stop some of this violence. And it all boils down, I believe, to families and respect for life. We seem to have lost that with some of our young folks today.
Mr. Larissa, this is for you and Sheriff Hardwick. In 25 years, this case is going to go back before a panel, and they're going to look at it.
Right.
According to state law, what is your message to the people who are reviewing it 25 years from now?
Well, and first, thank you. And first, let me be clear. Some folks were under the impression that it's an automatic release at 25 years. Let me be very clear. It is not. The judge, whoever that may be, will have the opportunity to either affirm the sentence or change it. The sad thing is that the judge will not have been in that courtroom today or all week to have seen and heard firsthand what the families experienced. So my challenge to them is similar to what my challenge was to y'all. Put yourself in these folks' position. Try to imagine what it was like to get that phone call, to your child to be missing on Mother's Day, and then to get that news. I bet it's incomprehensible, but this family had to go through it, and God bless them for it. And I'll turn it over to Sheriff Hardwick.
Thank you, Mr. Larissa. I will tell you this case can be reviewed 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and 100 years from now. The facts of this case will never change. In this case, the reports, the forensic evidence, everything, the I's were dotted, the T's were crossed by this entire team. Between the State Attorney's Office, the family, and the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office, this case is untouchable. They can try this thing 1,000,000 times, and the same result will be with him going to prison for the rest of his life, period.
Yes, ma'am.
Also, Sheriff, the judge today said this was one of the most daunting cases in St. Johns County, and in the 30 years that he's been in this region, this one stands out. What are your thoughts?
Well, I started my career in 1980 working in the criminal justice system, and I've got to say it is absolutely one of the worst. But and again, I don't want to tempt fate, and I hate to say it, but in my 43 years of working in the system, I say this is the worst case I've ever seen, and then something else happens. I hope and pray that's not the case now, but I can tell you that this is certainly one of the worst that I've ever seen.
Thank you, sir. Once again, I had the privilege of actually working under R.J. Larissa, his assistant chief, in charge of the homicide investigation unit for 4 counties. This is my 31st year in law enforcement, and this is to take no respect away from the Bailey family at all. This is how we treat all of our victims, by the way, in St. Johns County. They receive and they get first-class customer service, as it's the most heinous and atrocious crime, whether it be the simplest crime to this crime we work today. But I can actually agree with R.J. Larissa in my 31 years, working 12 years homicide under him. This is the most egregious, horrific case based on all the facts. Yes, ma'am.
Defense attorneys in this case filed repeatedly, whenever they could. There is a chance that they'll file an appeal. What is your response to that?
Well, the good news is that they pled. When you enter a plea to a crime, you waive a lot of your appellate rights as a defendant. For example, the right to confront witnesses, the right to have a jury trial, the right to challenge the verdict. He can only challenge whether or not the sentence was lawful and whether or not it was that it was free and voluntarily made. They can always attack their attorneys, and they typically do down the road for ineffective assistance of counsel. But all the other appellate rights or the constitutional rights were waived by the defendant. So that is a big plus for having a plea versus a trial. Thank y'all so much for being here today. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you, brother. Hold on. That's up. No, hey, look at this case. Don't do it nothing.
Mr. Larissa,
Yes, sir.
where to next for Mr. Fucci? Where is he going?
He's going to
Until he's
Florida
18.
State Prison. Now they'll put him in a facility where they house juveniles that have been sentenced as adults. He'll probably go to the reception center first for a brief classification period, and then he'll wind up being transferred. And there's several what they call youthful offender institutions where they have a number of them housed, and they try to keep them together.
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Right.
And I just got a briefing on that today, so I think it's pretty accurate.
Okay.
Okay? You're Nick, right? Vic, I'm sorry. Brian says a lot about you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thanks.
And listen, y'all, You know, this is tough, but, you know, just